This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On Air.
Welcome to the OI Podcast, Otago Institute podcast, in-depth conversations with experts from the worlds of arts, sciences and mataranga Māori, brought to you by the Otago Institute, the Otago branch of the Royal Society for Arts and Sciences. Kia ora, I'm Dr Barb.
And I'm Trudi, and today's show is Urban Redevelopment, and we're in conversation with Glen Hazelton. Glen holds a BA Honours and Masters from Auckland University, but we won't hold that against him because then he saw the light and moved to do a PhD from the University of Otago in political science. But now is a project director, City Centre Plan for the Dunedin City Council. So welcome along, Glen. It's great to have you here.
Kia ora, thank you for having me.
Kia ora, Glen. Now, did we pronounce your name right there?
There's multiple pronunciations of it. Hazelton, normally.
Hazelton, Hazelton. Either way, it's all right. You're not going to hold it against us.
Call me whatever you like, just don't call me late for dinner.
Hey, thanks for coming along. We've been very excited to get you in the studio here and talk to you about all the fantastic things that you've done to the urban scape of Dunedin, because it is a fantastic little city and we like to refer to it as a boutique city.
Mm-hmm. I can endorse that. It's
well, you think boutique hotels are always the best, so boutique city's got to be pretty cool as well.
Yes. But before we get to that, I thought we'd just delve in, because I just noticed as we were doing the intro there that you've got a PhD in political sciences. Now, how does that set you up for urban redevelopment, or how did you come to be where you are now?
Yeah, so strangely enough, my PhD is actually in Russian foreign policy making.
Well, that's even better.
Let's even talk about that.
So Russian foreign policy making.
Yes.
What period?
I looked at the post-communist period, so I was really looking at the impact of liberalisation and democratisation on foreign policy making.
All right, so post 1990s, 2000s and up to now.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep, sort of post-91. So, yeah.
And how does that relate to the Dunedin scape?
It doesn't at all. Occasionally when I'm sitting around a council table, you sometimes think there's some similarities with your political science background. But I kind of got to near the end of my PhD and thought, I'm on the wrong track here. I'd always wanted to be an architect, and because of some bad advice that I'd had probably from one of my teachers at school, they'd kind of steered me away from it and made me think I couldn't do it. So I'd always been really interested in history and really interested in architecture, and I ended up working for Department of Conservation first off out of uni, and worked in their heritage department.
Wow.
So that kind of, then when I came to Dunedin the first time, I was working in the heritage area, and again it was kind of like sometimes life leads you in the direction you're supposed to go anyway. True. And because I love architecture and history and heritage so much, that's what my job became.
Right,
so,
and Dunedin has obviously got some gorgeous heritage buildings there. It's got
the best
a lovely,
in the country. Yeah,
obviously, and a foundation for those architecture dreams of
absolutely.
yours.
I mean, when I came down here as a student, I'd never really been to Dunedin before. I think I'd been here once before as a flying visit, and the first thing that struck me was just how incredible the architecture was down here. And I was really lucky that my first place that I lived in was one of Basil Hooper's designs up in Heriot Row.
Oh, wow. I lived in
Nice.
Heriot Row as a student as well.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
I didn't realise there was any fancy houses up there, though.
Yeah.
So ignorance of a life
I think
sciences
it's number 26,
student.
and it's absolutely fantastic arts and crafts place. It's just beautiful.
There you go. I think he's the same person responsible for the houses out on the Aramoana Spit, the pilot houses, is he?
I'm not too sure.
Oh, I might have it completely wrong. I'm really out of my depth. Don't take any notice of that, listeners. No notice at all.
But we do accept corrections, so
Yes,
feel free.
Feel free to just type on the Facebook page there, Barbara, what are you talking about? Just stay in your lane. Hey, that's really interesting. And I must say that I'm always telling visitors that we have at home that, Dunedin, it was the biggest city in New Zealand back in the day, and that of course goes back when that early European time, because this is where the gold rush all came through to here, and of course we had the big port, and that meant that a lot of the big prominent buildings were built thinking of the future, so they were built to last, and
absolutely.
they weren't just set, I mean, of course they are functional, but they weren't just set on function as, people could go there and work and they were going to stand up and protect from the elements. They had that function of being imposing, sending a signal to the...
Making a statement.
Making a statement.
And they wanted to give that sense of permanence for somewhere that was actually relatively young as well. Especially when you think about the banks and the insurance companies. They were building these very grand buildings because they wanted to have that sense of we are stable, we are a growing city. We're here.
Yeah, you can put your money in us
and
it will be trusted.
Yes.
No, so there's all those...
Yeah.
Well, I don't. Yeah.
Again, they'll move northwards.
No, there was an early run in the late 1800s.
Oh, was there? I don't remember that, Trudi. I have to bow to your age and wisdom. Hey, no, right. So I guess then, of course, there's the registry building at the university. It's the obvious as a student. That's the first thing that you see, and that's that beautiful blue stone and Oamaru stone, which is quite a feature of the Dunedin architecture.
Absolutely. And it's something that, coming from Auckland, I hadn't seen before. And that was, I think, one of the things that really struck me about Dunedin was that the campus feel, like Auckland University doesn't have that same feeling of
sort
being
of dispersed all around the city, isn't it? Yeah.
And kind of, a lot of the time, even in the classes I was having, you were in buildings in the city rather than in buildings on campus. Right. So coming here, the first thing I noticed was walking down the first day to uni was these beautiful houses on Pitt Street with the turrets and everything. And I was like, I'm going to own one of them one day.
And have you managed
No,
that?
I haven't. And I don't think I ever will, unfortunately.
Well, some of them are now like
give a little
businesses.
I can still dream. Did anyone get the lotto the other night?
No, so it's still going.
Maybe still.
It's too stressful.
Yeah,
so that's interesting because, if you think about it, so the focus in terms of urban development, kind of protecting that identity of the campus as an area, so it's constrained. So we have that kind of real campus identity compared to other places. Must be a key part of your remit.
Well, I think it's something that I think the council, just like with the central city, with the different precincts, you want to protect that feel, that the uniqueness that it gives Dunedin, and you don't want to see that compromised. The thing that I always have in the back of my mind, though, is that every generation wants to add something, and add a layer to the city. So you've got to think about how that can be done in a way that adds it in a valuable way. I look at a couple of periods in our past, probably in the 60s and the 80s, where a lot of really great buildings got knocked down, and that's not kind of the layer you want added, because all we got was car parks. After that,
terrible
and some
buildings.
terrible buildings.
Some terrible buildings. I'm thinking square and concrete. I would say though, just on that topic, one of my favourite arguments with my aunt is about Toitu, because I think that's, I don't know what your opinion is, and feel free to say there, but I think it's a fantastic building because it's about, it used to be called the Early Settlers Museum, and it's about that kind of recent history and progression, and I really like the fact that there's basically three buildings from three distinct eras that have kind of been joined together. So I really love the glass bit at the front that's the newest part, because I think it really speaks to that kind of graduation and that kind of continuing journey. And what are your feelings on that building there, Trudi?
Well, I'm just sitting here slightly amused, the old bus services depot, which was
it's a beautiful
building,
building.
And it was perfectly functional. It was built to function, but it had form and it had character, and it's one of my favourite kind of styles, but it met its purpose. It was a bus depot. They come in, they got serviced, and then they went out the other end. What do we do now? We zigzag in and out, stuff like that. So it's about, as you say, as each generation wants to add a layer. Sometimes we forget that previous generations might have had some good ideas. But
in terms of a building that I think is adding that new layer to the city at the moment is the new ACC building.
Oh, it's looking really
beautiful.
cool.
It is looking really fantastic.
It is absolutely stunning. It fits perfectly in that space. It doesn't try to pretend it's a heritage building. It's uniquely Māori. It's uniquely modern, and I absolutely love it. And I think that's where I'd like to see more of that type of architecture in the city. That's again like the bus services building. That was it was more than it needed to be. And that could just be a boring box.
It could be, yeah.
But it's not.
No.
Yeah.
It's interesting because we used to design and build buildings that were flashy and stuff like that. So, and we come to, I'm looking out the window at something that's quite square, and mind you, I've got a bit of a passion for Stalinist Soviet blocks because I think in their place they have a challenge an aesthetic all of their own, but I wouldn't like to live in one, let's be honest. But why have we got so we just got practical? Is it cost driven? Is it?
I think a lot of it is cost driven. There's obviously an architectural reaction against those, the sort of more decorative, and buildings that we had in the past. But a lot of it does really come down to cost, and that's a real challenge.
Can I ask a question there about the cost? Is the cost worked out over the lifespan of the building? Because those buildings, they might have cost more in the day, but they're still here 150 years later, and I've probably had a bit of renovation here and there, but they're still here. Whereas the hospital building, which I don't know how much of it's going to get demolished, but there's buildings in that development which, I don't know, some of them are 50 years old. And that's kind of like setting the cost of them being built over 50 years as opposed to 150 years. So I guess that's where my question is what's the longevity of these buildings, and is that taken into account, or is it like, you could put a cardboard box up and it would be super cheap, but it's not going to last very long. Yeah, although nothing against the Christchurch Cathedral, because that's fantastic.
And my experience with the developers that I've worked with, different developers take different perspectives and different time frames that they're expecting to get a return back off the building. And
a return back, what does that mean?
So they can make money off it, basically. So,
right.
so if they're going to invest...
I don't know, so it's been there longer than it cost to build?
Well, a lot of the buildings you're looking at here, some of the heritage buildings out here, they require quite a bit more investment now to bring them up with earthquake strengthening rules, etc. And some will say, it's just you won't make the money back on them quickly enough, and you'll spend more money on the building than it's going to be worth. Other investors that I know, particularly people down in the warehouse precinct, have looked at it differently and said, actually, our time frame for getting that return on the building is much longer. So we can afford to invest because we know that building is going to be there for another 100, 150 years.
Yeah, I
so
suppose
short term, so people who just want to make lots of money quickly, they're not really going to be interested in often beautiful buildings.
I guess that sums up the 80s, doesn't it? People who want to make money quickly and don't care about anything else. That sums up the 80s. Sorry, Trudi.
Okay, so I was around in the 1800s and now I'm in the 1980s. We've got a slot of Doctor Who joke in here somewhere. But I think it's interesting because I work in procurement, so we're looking at the whole life costs. So, and buildings, there's a whole lot of organisations, brands and all sorts of stuff like that will give you the whole of life costs for a building. So if you think about it, I suppose it depends on where your accountant or economist might take you to calculate that.
Yeah, and I think there's also a growing trend towards people kind of placing more social value into things as well, and recognising that, a building and the place that you work actually can influence the culture of the organisation that you work for. It makes you feel good about coming to work or not coming,
And the health of the people working there
Absolutely.
quite often,
that
like based on
sick building
light and
syndrome or whatever they call
fresh
it as
air
well.
and, earthquake strengthening as well.
I mean, during COVID, a lot of effort went into making sure buildings were healthy. So, there was good air circulation and that, so you could come to work for that social aspect as well as keeping people well.
And that's one of the challenges we still face now, is getting people back into the city and getting people back into buildings as well. Because people have got used to working at home, and I certainly do that myself. But it also does have impacts on the CBD, and trying to keep it vibrant and keep those smaller businesses going.
Yeah, and I think that also comes back to that whole third place idea, doesn't it? So people have like your home is your first place and work is your second place, and then that third place is those other social areas that you use on a regular basis, like the library or the local cafe or the local pub or whatever. I mean, I guess in the UK, a lot of kind of social life is centred around the local pub, just because people don't do that, going to houses to entertain each other as much as we tend to do here in New Zealand, I think. But and I guess that's part of what you have to take into account when you are envisioning a development like the redevelopment of George Street.
Absolutely. And I guess the things that we sort of, there was a lot of consultation over a number of years for George Street, but there's kind of a last round of consultation that we did probably the year before we started construction, and there was some really cool meetings that I sat in and just listened to what people were saying about what they thought was missing from the central city. And it wasn't...
What were some of those things?
Well, one of the things that came through really strongly, because we were trying to also target groups who maybe hadn't had their say before or didn't feel as confident coming forward to, they weren't the squeaky wheels that we hear from all the time. And I remember sitting in one meeting with a group of more elderly people, and one of the people there really strongly stuck with me, and she said that a lot of older people were struggling because in the post-COVID environment they were nervous about coming to town.
Right.
And they were ending up staying at home a lot more and becoming very socially isolated, which was having obviously impacts on their well-being, their mental health, and not making them feel connected to community. And so we were thinking, well, what's one of the things that could possibly help with that? And the thing that came through was spaces for people to even just come into town and sit and be around people of different age groups, different cultures. And that's kind of where part of the playground idea came from, was very much thinking, what if we had a space that people can sit around and experience other generations in the city. So, and that sort of struck with me, that comment about people becoming very isolated, because I think a lot of, the challenges I see in my job every day is a lot around people who just don't talk to each other anymore. And I think that's a real shame. And so what we wanted to do was create spaces where people could bump into each other, could interact. And one of the things I loved when I was working out on George Street during the construction period is seeing all the people bringing their lunches out from the buildings and sitting on the seats on George Street.
And they are really beautiful seats to sit on. They're really lovely seats. I love the way that they're kind of the form of them.
And some of those,
Probably a fancy word for that.
Yeah, and they face there's places where they face each other, so it encourages people. And I'd sit out there and you'd bump into so many people you knew.
And that's a trait of Dunedin, right? It's quintessential to be anywhere in any public space, and you're bound to see someone that you know, or through someone else.
But for example, that farmers block where we finished out the first block, there was previously no seats in that block. There had been one and it had been removed.
Interesting.
Oh yeah, because I remember having to bag it for my nephew's graduation. So I remember they could sit down. So you're quite right.
Oh, right.
Yeah, like there's no seating. So if you've got a graduation parade, you've got to bring your own.
Where do the short people sit?
Yeah. And it's also, that people saying, I'm not that sure on my feet, so I need to stop a couple of times while I walk down the street. If there's no seat for people to do that, then those people aren't going to come to town.
They just don't go, Oh, people with, injuries or, there's a lot of people who are temporarily disabled or permanently disabled, but there's a lot of people that just have strains and sore legs, sore feet, that you just need to take a breather. But an interesting thing, it's just always on my mind at the moment, is a lot of people don't realise that social isolation, it's not just people sitting at home and go and get out there, but it is one of the top preconditions for dementia. And it really is a causal factor, because it's like any muscle. Not that your brain's a muscle, it's full of lipids, but
that does make sense. So my dad has dementia, and I think that a lot of that relates to the fact that after he retired, he very much did that typical Kiwi thing,
male thing,
where they just backed away from all of their friends and had very little interaction with people.
Yeah, and it is a real key thing if you're thinking of retirement, if you've got people who are on that retirement line, to make sure that you don't give up all your friend circle and your social interactions. And, like some of us have a lot of friends through work. You've got to be really mindful of that as you... Yeah.
And so that interaction for us was one of those key elements. So working from the beginning of the project, we also sat down with mana whenua and we worked through a whole lot of different principles. And really those principles are good urban design principles, as well as good cultural principles. And one of the key ones was manaakitaka, so having a welcoming space for people to come to. So whether that's the playground area, because the other people we heard from in those meetings was families saying it was really difficult to come into town with kids.
Oh, yeah, because if you've ever gone on Christmas shopping, I mean, you don't have to be that extreme, but if you've ever gone into town shopping with kids and they're running all over the places in the way and making noise and stuff, and sometimes they do just, like, I'm sure the parents just need like a breather between shops.
They just need a little seesaw.
Yeah, they just need some space where they can kind of let off a little bit of steam that's not inside the shop.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that families had said to us was having somewhere that they could go that was free was really important. Because, I guess previously, I think McDonald's used to have a playground.
They did, yeah.
But most of the other things, for families in the central city, you have to pay for.
Yeah.
And that was the same message we got from young people, like youth council, etc., that kids coming down from after school, they don't want to have to go and spend money somewhere, but they want to go and be somewhere and feel that they're allowed to be somewhere.
Yeah. So are we thinking...
And not the bus hub.
The bus hub. Yeah, so it's the bus hub. Now, I think that there's a fundamental flaw in the way that the bus hub has been designed, and that leads to a feeling of anxiousness and... I don't know, I just in other countries where I've been, bus hubs have been in a big place, usually partly at least covered, with little cafes and shops around that people sit at, and there's shopkeepers, cafe people there, while you're waiting for the buses. And I've always particularly hated where the bus hub, that's totally personal opinion, I'm sure there's other people out there, and I wouldn't like to say that is any wider than myself, but I've always personally hated the space that the bus hub is in. And for me, I'd much rather they took over the railway station again and had the bus hub outside the railway station.
Well,
who knows what might happen in that space?
Ooh. You might have heard it here first.
No, definitely not. I don't know anything about that. But one of the things we looked at with that was we knew that there's... when I was growing up in Auckland, the downtown bus terminal, I don't know if you ever experienced that, it was the closest place that I could go to catch a bus from work, but I would walk 10 minutes down the road to go to another bus stop. So that was something that we did think about with the work that we've just done in the central city, was really to make those stops outside the hospital a lot more attractive as well. And I think they're now some of the most popular stops in the city. So I think there's something to be said about not always centralising everything into putting everything into one space. And it's the same with seating. The more seating we have, the more it spreads things out.
Can I add bicycle stands to that list? Because I feel like there's a real lack of bicycle stands in some places.
Okay, we suck in quite a few on George Street, but there's probably more areas we can run.
Octagon, I feel like there could be more. Round the ends of the cycle tracks, particularly, because people want to cycle on the cycle tracks, but then they want to stop somewhere at the end. I mean, I don't really know much about the peninsula side of the harbour. Trudi might be able to speak to that.
They're mostly leant up against the Duck Cafe, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah. I know
and the other thing in Nelson, they kind of have little things about this high, desktop high for people listening, that have like fixture puncher, little tools attached.
They do
to
have
it.
one of those.
I've seen one.
They've got two of them on the
right.
Yeah, and there's another one right at the start at Port Chalmers. There.
Yeah, but
the Rotary Club put them in.
Oh, go to the Rotary Club.
Yeah, the bike house on Lower Stewart Street have a few tools and a air thing, and I think Electrify New Zealand, he's amazing. Honestly, I had a flat tyre. Actually, when we were in the old studio, Dommy, and I had my little bike there, and I was like, it doesn't work. It's got a flat tyre on the way, cycling on the way to the studio. And of course I was late, and you can't be late on radio because you end up sounding like you're in some sort of blue movie because you're breathing deeply still. So I transform my habits now. I always arrive 15 minutes early so I can get a control of my breathing. Anyway, that's I took the bike along, and he was lovely. Very much appreciate that. Shout out to Electrify New Zealand there.
But coming back to the bus hub,
Yes, sorry.
it'll be interesting because they've got the medical centre being built. Are they,
The Pacific Radiology one across
Yeah.
the road.
No, it's true.
Yeah.
So that will change that whole look of that area.
Because when they're first there, because you used to get the bus and I could text my coffee order to the coffee cart man and it would be there when I arrived. So, I
That's
think,
pretty, yeah.
as it changes, I think the thing for me that challenging but I find is I don't think there should be any vehicles through the bus hub, but of course you've got to get access to the Countdown car park. So
Yeah, but there's
it is
access on the other side.
I know
I
that.
think it's interesting, though. One of the things that I had never thought about, and I'm not really closely involved with the work that's going on around the safety around the bus hub at the moment. There's other people in council doing that. But one of the things one of my colleagues talked to me about was the fact that previously, many of the schools, you used to just catch the bus home from school.
That's what we
Yes.
always did as school kids. And to me, it seems really strange to have all the kids have to walk into town to go to the bus hub and then catch this bus back. And sometimes driving back past the school that they've just come from.
I suppose it depends where your school is, what bus route you're on, of course, because there are a few schools that you can get to Stewart Street quite easily from.
Yeah. I mean, it's basically it's a Ministry of Education decision to not fund school buses and that wherever there is a public bus service, they will not fund school buses.
And it probably supports the bus service as well. It's
Yeah.
probably a good thing for...
Maybe.
Because I think, did I see in the ODT that the bus patronage is up?
21%.
Yeah, substantially.
21% from June till June 23 to June 24.
Which is great.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. Yeah. Anyway, that's buses for you. Let's get back to urban redevelopment.
Sure.
Oh, hold on, just one
Oh, no,
last.
one last thing. Go on.
I got up with my very enthusiastic son and we arrived to greet the first bus that arrived to the bus hub at some 6 o'clock in the morning. Well, they had the official opening the day before we were there and we felt like we should wave flags to welcome
right.
the
Was
first
this when
bus.
it first opened?
Yeah, when it
Wow,
first
that's
opened
really cool.
for the first bus.
Oh, right, yeah. No.
We were the two nutters standing in the street, bus driver, yeah.
What are those people doing?
Yeah. No, I don't want to get on the bus. We're just saying, yay. So pleased.
No, there's all sorts of things like that, though, isn't there? There's the first, when they had the opening of the, what's it called? The motorway bit out to Green Island there.
Southern Motorway.
Southern Motorway, yeah.
But yeah, they do that
And
a
they
lot
closed
with...
it and they had it for opening for people to walk along.
Oh,
they,
yeah.
They
We
do that all
went
the
to
time with
go-
state highways up north and stuff.
We went to Auckland and walked through the Waterfree Tunnel.
That's really cool.
That was really exciting. We need to get a life. Okay, let's go back to
Okay, so we're going back to George Street and we're talking. So what's been in the paper at the moment is
Our poor trees.
trees. And I really hate it when anyone vandalises trees. And it really annoys me a little bit on Facebook that people are going about the cost of it rather than going, what the heck?
Yeah.
What the hell? Sorry, but what are we doing with our society where it's cool to go around and vandalise trees? That is not cool behaviour.
Yeah, so as our comms person he was like, what did the tree ever do to anyone?
Yeah.
So
It's like,
weird.
Gives
Even
you
if-
shade, gives you
Yeah, even if you
fruits
were
and-
angry about anything else happening
take
on
it
the
out on the
street, you don't
tree.
take it out on the trees.
Yeah.
The trees don't deserve it. So, yeah, I know that $5,000 sounds like a lot of money to replace the trees.
So now I had a comment on that. So as a garden person, anyone who's ever been anything to do with gardens, even just visited a garden centre, you will quickly appreciate that the cost of plants increases the bigger they are because someone had to keep them alive and there's a certain proportion that die off, so you have to take that into account with your pricing. And successfully replanting plants, trees, is usually pretty well correlated to the size of the plant that you're replanting and the health of the plant.
Yep.
So to me, $5,000, yes, that's a lot of money, but you're not planting, first year saplings.
No,
here,
they're not
right?
tiny little saplings. They're trees that have been grown on for a number of years. Some of the trees out there, some of the bigger ones, they're 10 years old that they've been grown on. So someone has spent 10 years caring for that tree before it's come in to George Street. And obviously, they're really precious assets for us. And, there's a lot of work that's gone in also to make sure that they grow as well as they possibly can. So there's a really cool system that they get planted into. It's like a cellular kind of system. It also stops all the tree roots going into the pipes and into the surfaces as they previously did. And make sure, and you can see that a lot of those gardens and those trees are growing exceptionally well.
They look amazing, and I really love what they've done with the big rocks and the native plantings in amongst them.
Yeah. So there's a lot of cost that goes into those trees. The other thing is that they're really, really hard to find. So there is a real shortage of mature trees to buy around the country.
Right.
And you also don't want to bring them from too far away because then they'll get that shock of
being in Dunedin in the middle of winter.
So that's why we brought them in from Invercargill, because it was like being on holiday for them, somewhere warmer. And we have had a few, that we've had to pull out and replace, and they go back to be cared for again. They don't. We get them out before they die.
Right, you don't shred them. You get them out.
We get them out and they go back and they get cared for again. There was a few that we actually transplanted as well through the George Street. Some of the ones that were smaller on George Street, we managed to keep a couple of them and get them into Great King Street.
Cool. Oh, nice.
So, when I heard that on Monday morning, I was... some choice words were said in the office, because it's not just those three. We'd also lost another one in New Edinburgh Way where someone had parked where they weren't supposed to park and then just reversed over it. And it was seen by people in the restaurant. So another reason why we don't want people parking where they're not supposed to park, because you might just not see the tree, and what if that tree was a child?
Yeah. It's interesting though, because didn't we have to do up the medium strip up the top of Stewart Street, because they'd done some plantings and somebody just rode their cars through, and that's why we've got those big stones, which, I must say, looks really good, and the big clumps of wood.
I don't know. I quite like that sort of landscaping with big...
Yeah.
It's not just plants, it's got rocks in it, and that's kind of a bit how landscapes... Well, through Central Otago, I guess that's quite a rocky background that I've got there.
And the rocks that we've put in on George Street also... The intention was to try and offer some of those sort of more informal play opportunities for kids as well. So you'll often see them jumping up onto the little concrete things and jumping onto the stones and stuff. I like that. It's really cool.
And new big development for the CBD is that we're going to allow dogs in.
I know, this is exciting.
As a dog owner,
I
I'm so excited about it, because my dogs just reminded me about it when you said that, because my dog, they're just little Shebas and they love jumping on rocks. They just love being up on rocks. And the main thing, I guess, is that everybody's worried about the poo situation. Yeah. So just dog owners out there,
be responsible.
Yeah. This is our chance.
Yeah. This is a responsibility, not a right.
Exactly. Yeah. This is our chance to have our beloved puppies with us. And let them in, and I think we do everybody a disservice if we don't have that interaction, because there's a lot of old people who would like to have pets, but they can't have the responsibility of looking after them.
Yeah. There's a lot of people that rent now that are never going to be able to afford to buy a house and probably can't have dogs.
Yeah.
I always think I used to bring my puppies into the office, the back way, obviously, of course, never on George Street, and you'd always have people stopping you on the way to ask for a pat. And any time I see a dog, I'm the same. I go, oh, can I pat your dog? And it's a way to bring people together. There's people that I meet at the beach that I have no idea what their names are.
Yeah, but you know what their dog's name.
Exactly. And again, I think, in the world we have at the moment, and where everything seems so aggravated and people are so grumpy, just that opportunity to talk to someone different about
and have a smile about a dog being cute.
And you don't have to talk politics, you don't have to talk about parking, you don't have to talk about all these things. You can just pat the dog and have a nice moment.
You should have a dog, a city support dog. I know one of the schools have got
I could do with emotional support dog.
Yeah, well, my Aki Mai, Ralph's Aki Mai, she thinks she would like to be the University of Otago mascot dog, because we used to work right next to the University of Otago when she was a puppy, and we were really lucky I was allowed to take her into the office with me. And so at lunchtime we'd go for a walk along the registry there in the green and the stuff, and the students just loved her. And of course there's a number of, she's a Shiba Inu, so it's the number one dog breed for Japan and South Korea, and a lot of those international students obviously couldn't bring their dogs with them, so it reminds them of the dog that they left behind.
It'd be something that reminds them of home.
So it'd be reminding them of home. So they just got and like to this day, if she sees someone who looks like they're South Korean or Japanese or might like to pet her, she just goes crazy, like all wiggly, and her eyes go all crinkly, and she smiles and she's wiggling. She's got her ears back, and she's like, ah. And she's just recently, she's been going to the care facility with me. And of course, I don't want her being too pushy with people who are a little bit less stable. So she's on her best behaviour when she's there, and she's getting treats after she's greeted. And sometimes I give the treats to the folks in the care home for them to give to her. And so now she's got it in her head that whenever she greets someone, she gets a treat.
Not the best habit to be in.
Yeah,
So anyway, if anybody gets mauled by a Shiba because you didn't give them a treat.
No, she doesn't. She doesn't maul people. Of course, she just doesn't maul people. You know that.
I know that.
But I think it's also, we're also, with, as I said before, we've got more and more people living in the central city as well.
Yeah.
And so it's great. I met someone yesterday and I said, oh, where are you living? They're like, oh, we live in Bond Street. And I was like, well, that's so cool. You're in an apartment and they've got a dog and they walk their dog around the area. And, so it's, I think, lifestyles are changing. That's the big thing that I, also came through with really strongly for me with George Street was the last time we did the street up was over 30 years ago.
Wow.
It was 1989, 1990. And you think about all of those things that have changed in that period. It's, our lifestyles have changed so dramatically.
And the population of Dunedin must have changed as well.
Yeah, and I think it's a much more diverse population as well now.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I remember when I first came here as a student, that was the first thing that sort of struck me was that, this is not as diverse as I'm used to coming from Auckland.
Yeah.
But now I just feel like it's changed a lot. And that was, really strongly what we wanted to, is make a street that encourages people to interact and come together. And even if that interaction is just, you're trying to look at the person who's driving the car towards you to see that they're going slowly, so you walk out and you've got the pedestrian right of way.
Yeah.
So, my big question, when are we going to have no cars in George Street?
That's entirely a political question.
Oh, okay, we'll move on to something we can talk about.
But
I know there have been discussions.
There have, and I think, when I came back to Dunedin for this project, it was very much that you had two polar opposite views. You had people who wanted full pedestrianisation and people that just wanted it to stay the same. And I see my role as always about trying to find the compromises, but that are compromises that are positive compromises as well.
It's a risk that you just don't please anyone if you go down that compromise.
Absolutely. But here I think, what we ended up being able to present to council was we can still keep traffic in there so that people who are really still reliant on vehicles can get close to the chemist, do those little quick jobs that they need to do. But by taking out a lane and all of the turning lanes, we gain so much more public space. So we can actually do a lot of the things that you do with a fully pedestrianised space. Yeah. Plus we have automatic bollards that go up and down.
Which are really cool.
So
which are really cool. And we've got an app and you can do it. And
I can do it myself.
I can see a time.
No, you can do it.
There's, we've been in conversations with, the malls in particular. They ran an open day
right.
and there's discussions about, maybe we'll do some more of those. And, maybe over summer, maybe it's over the cruise ship season.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's a good idea.
Maybe we're talking about a music festival and stuff down there as well. It's like you can close off a block, you can close off all of the blocks.
It was so amazing when we had Ed Sheeran here and we had it closed off the top of Lower Stewart Street, and the Octagon was all closed off, and there was live music and the cafes and all the bars and everything was spilling out, and there's just so many people in town that you could actually and obviously it was a beautiful weekend as well, which always helps, but
it's always
it was
like that.
Just amazing. And it had like the temporary plant pots around, and I think there was a sand pit in the Octagon there.
Oh, yep.
So it was just like a really
fun day at the beach.
Yeah, it was like just a fun outing. Like everybody was on holiday, even though obviously everybody wasn't on holiday, but it just had that atmosphere about it, and it just seemed to feel like less like a kind of hustle bustle place that you have to go and get out of as soon as possible, and more like a place where you could actually sit and have a drink or just a bowl of chips or something outside and not be constantly assaulted by fumes and cars and the sound of cars, but just have like a kind of cruisy day.
Yeah. And that's what we've tried to provide, is the opportunity to do more of those types of things with George Street as well. And so we kind of finished at exactly the wrong time, in a sense, going into autumn and winter.
Oh, right,
And so I feel like spring, summer.
You should have just wound it out a little bit longer, taken a little bit longer.
No, I don't
that would have killed me,
so.
and I don't think people of Dunedin
I'm joking, of course, folks. I'm
Um,
joking, of course.
But
no, I have to say because we go to Bath Street every Saturday and we couldn't wait to go, and we just really enjoyed it, even if it was in the middle of winter, because it's so much more light. You know, you can meander around.
I guess
middle
that
of the
brings us
road
to
and-
the because it's not completely finished, right? So there's still the bit on the top of Lower Stewart Street and Bath Street, and of course,
And then when are we going to do Princess Street?
well, no,
and
let's
what about the Octagon?
Yes,
yeah,
I
the
know.
Octagon definitely needs to do.
So we need to keep investing in our lovely.
Yeah, so
city.
the George Street Retail Quarter was one part of a 10 to 15 year program.
right.
Obviously, we're currently getting reports together and some evidence to go back to council and say, what should that prioritisation look like? Clearly, with rates rises and cost of living, we're not going to be rocking straight on to do something else, I don't think. So we're trying to come up with, well, what would we do next? When will that start? We are working in Bath Street at the moment. That will get a light touch makeover at the end that we're working on.
How long is that program to be?
So as I understand it, the underground works should all be finished by April, and then we'll go in and follow that up with.
Because it's a huge project, that underground
Yeah, so
work.
and that brings us to the other thing is, of course, that the need to get on and do both the George Street redevelopment and Bath Street wasn't driven by, hey, we just want to waste
Look
money,
nice.
taxpayers' money, and make this ratepayers' money, and make this all look beautiful. The underlying need was really that you had to dig everything up to do the
Absolutely.
infrastructure.
Absolutely.
And because everything was being dug up anyway, it's the best opportunity to save money and do the redevelopment at the same time. So
Exactly.
you
That was-
really are being efficient with the ratepayers' money.
That's the entire intent of the Central City Plan, was to bring together the three waters upgrades and the transport upgrades, so that everyone has those jokes about, someone goes out and puts new line markings down on the street, and a week later it gets dug up and replaced. So we didn't want to be doing that. We also didn't want to be in the situation where I was last living, which was in Wellington, where every couple of weeks there was another part of the street failing and spouts of water. And
Which does happen at Keary's Bay. I don't want to bring the water system of Keary's Bay into the discussion, but having opened it, it's what happens with old pipes, right? Because if something fails and you fix just that bit, then of course all the pressure is now on the next bit, which was just as old, and so then that fails. And if you haven't got the money or the planning, and a lot of it's planning more than money, to actually fix the whole thing at once, then you're just going to have that continual having to fix bit, which not only cause a whole lot of disruption to local businesses and residents and everything, but actually eventually obviously costs more because you're having to send people out and then close it up and then open the next bit and then close it up.
the last thing you want to be doing is anything under emergency works.
Yeah.
This way we're kind of hoping that really. We also talked to all of the other infrastructure providers, and lots of them did upgrades of their infrastructure under the street while we were working in George Street as well.
So what are we talking there? Power,
fibre, those types of things.
Internet.
And even, internet. We updated some of the gas lines as well.
There's
So
still gas lines under.
yes, there is.
Oh, didn't realise that.
Yeah. There's a lot of things under the street that I did not realise were there.
Yeah, so mentioning that, what did we
Segueing.
find in Bath Street? And it better be good. Yeah,
so-
we're leading up to this.
Or George Street as a whole as well.
Yeah, so some of the most interesting, I guess George Street in particular has been dug over a number of times before, and we weren't sure whether we would find much at all.
Right.
Some of the cutest things I think we found were little children's shoes. Thankfully not attached to little children.
Oh gosh.
So I can hear my mother saying, I knew that's where you left that shoe.
I didn't even go there.
Also, an amazing range of ceramic ware that was all perfectly preserved and not broken.
wow.
Like soap dishes, toothpaste containers,
Like what sort of
makeup
age are we
containers.
thinking of these things?
Oh, like late 1800s.
Oh, wow. Toothpaste containers from the 1800s.
Yep. Really cute stuff.
And where is all that stuff now?
So it's now owned by council, and we will be looking at whether we can deposit it at Toitu.
Yeah.
And otherwise it would probably sit in our archives as well.
Yeah. Be cool to have a big exhibition of all those things, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. We did like a little mini one for Archaeology Week last year. I think we did like a little stand in Wall Street Mall, and people loved coming in and look and just seeing all the different things, being like, what is that? What, you know? And
I think maybe some of the more robust things you could have on permanent display on the street.
Well, it could be like art.
Well, we did
Art
talk about
installations.
some of the big old the parts of the pipes, like some of the handles and stuff like that. They're really cool, but we have not kept those on display out there. But the other cool thing that I loved the most is maybe a little more ephemeral, but when we were filming the pipes in the ground, so the big brick barrel, that look like London or Paris or something, it's very cool. We found eels swimming through them.
Like live eels?
Live eels.
Still there?
Still there.
Fantastic.
Wow, that's
Because
amazing.
they just come in from the ocean and they go up and they turn into streams eventually.
That's
And
so cool.
It's so cool. That was one of my favourite things that we found.
I was not
eels.
expecting that. That is so cool.
Which is why with Bath Street, the narrative that we're working with Mana Whenua for the design for Bath Street is based around tuna eels.
Wow. Oh, that is really
So
cool.
expect to see something that references that
So
very
can those
strongly.
eels still go through those pipes now that they've been redone?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep, through the stormwater pipes they can still go through.
That is so cool.
Yeah, that was one of my, seeing the videos, I was like, that is incredible. That is so cool.
And I suppose I shouldn't say it, but do other things go through the pipes?
There was a situation where one of the workers who was sending the video up got a very big fright one night because suddenly it went very, very dark, and then all of a sudden there was two eyes staring at him.
What was it?
He'd chased a possum up there.
Oh, crazy.
But we haven't really seen any rats or anything, so that's good.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Because sometimes it's wet and sometimes it's not, right?
Yeah, and most of the
Or
pipes...
is there permanent water there?
There's permanent water in some of them because really, if you think about between George Street and the harbour, there's not a lot of fall.
No.
So at high
Right.
tide, up to about Great King Street, those stormwater pipes fill with salt water
Right.
from the harbour.
Crazy. Wow. Huh. Eels.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
which is so
amazing.
cool.
It's like London, because London's got this map of all the hidden streams that go through it. And I guess that Dunedin has a smaller scale of that as well.
Absolutely.
Because, part of it's reclaimed.
And that's the work that Bath
Yeah.
Street is an underground water course.
Right.
Is that why
was-
it's called Bath Street?
Because it had baths
Yeah,
there.
there used to be baths there.
I was there with the old pool used to be. I
It was
thought that was
a
in
public
Great-
baths.
I thought that was in Great King Street, but it might
No,
have
there's-
been.
there's
No, it was
baths.
public baths.
Yeah.
For all the sea people, sailors.
Oh, I was going to say sea people. We've got mermaids now coming up.
Every now and again, I just lose all the words, folks.
I'm glad it was people and not... Yeah, there's
Yet again, we have not been drinking, listeners. This is our normal stuff.
But there's an amazing image I've seen of Bath Street where... So if you look at the moment, they're digging down quite deep, and that's down to what the old level used to be.
Right.
There's this really incredible picture. I think it might actually be taken from First Church, and it looks down, and you can see Bath Street's really, really low, and they've built up all of Moray Place around it. But all around Bath Street is all flax, because it was all very swampy, very tidal kind of area, and they gradually built it up and up and up. There's the pipe the big one that we're replacing that's collapsed is a water course that basically I think runs under the Regent and it's out there.
Yeah.
But there's other ones that there used to be, we came across it again, there's a water line that comes down from Heriot Row and used to pipe water down to the Cadbury factory
Oh, right.
from when there used to be a brewery there, I think, way back. So and it's still... There's a pipe.
There's some really cool maps in Toitu, and there's sort of a 306, I don't know if it's actually 360 degree kind of map of the 1800s there, quite early, and it's just amazing. You can see where the waterline was to start with. And
really close to...
Yeah, and like all those streets like Jetty Street and Water Street, they
called
called
that
that because that's where the jetty was, and it's quite far in. Like.
And the other... gosh, I can't remember the name of the building. The one with Heritage Coffee in it. It's the white building.
With the sheep outside of it.
Yep, with the sheep outside
and
of
the overbridge.
When the owner was doing work in that building and they were digging down, they found one of the old jetty piers in the building.
Because that's a beautiful...
Because it's built on where the jetty was.
Yeah, that's a beautiful example of a restored historical building there, isn't it?
Yeah,
and it's
absolutely.
really lovely done. And I love the inside courtyard that they've got there as well.
And again, they've married that, where someone had done some less tasteful alterations in the 1970s. They've put the modern element there now, and it contrasts, I think, really nicely with the heritage.
Beautiful tile work in there, which I think is modern.
Yeah, the beautiful green tile.
But beautiful tile work in there. And I guess that brings us back to your previous work, which was on that historical Vogel Street area there.
Yep.
And that was kind of a different type of work, wasn't it? Because that was sort of partnership with private companies, or I'm not actually sure. I'll let you describe
that. It really came
about
because we had some really, really motivated building owners down there who wanted to do something different, and they said to us, "Hey, we want to approach this in a different way. Can we collaborate with the council on this?" And at the time, it was something that we hadn't really done before, and so it led to a lot of changes. And we also had much smaller budgets to do the work. We didn't have a George Street type budget to do it.
I mean, but it's totally revitalised that area.
And there's still
some new use, different types of use, like dentist studios and there's physios and law firms.
And buildings that hadn't had use for decades, some of them.
Yeah.
There's some of the buildings that we worked on there that didn't even have power supplies to them, because they'd previously just come off a neighbour's building and they'd been vacant for 20 or 30 years.
Amazing.
Because I've been in the flats that are at the back of what used to be the Century Picture Theatre. They've redeveloped that, and it's got an internal atrium that goes right up the middle of the building. It's beautiful.
I see someone in that building's also just recently stuck a neon kind of lights up on it that says Oti Poti. And I see that every night when I go past, and I absolutely love it. I think it's really cute.
Really cool. I do always think that there must be a lot of the top bits of buildings that used to be a family business, and the family lived upstairs and the business was downstairs. There must be a lot of empty housing around that just needs refit, or big buildings that are in town that could be easily, in terms of more easily than building brand new apartment buildings, refitted and still retain kind of the essence of Dunedin. And I wonder if there's scope to go more down that road, and what your thoughts might be on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that I know quite a few of our councillors are really interested in, is bringing more residential into the CBD.
Yeah.
And there's quite a bit already. We dealt with lots of these people while we were doing the George Street works, because we were waking them up at night, etc. So we know where all the apartments are now. But you're bringing more in, I think, is a really important thing also, because it's the state of our cities is changing. It's not all just, people are buying lots more in retail online. So we have to think about other uses for these buildings as well. And residential is a fantastic choice for that.
Yeah. And I mean, overseas, we've got friends who live in Bonn, and they live basically on one of the main thoroughfares, but they've just got, and it's a really old building, but it's just got fantastic sound, retrofitted sound, whatever it's called. Proofing. And, triple glazed windows and soundproofing, and it just, honestly, you can't hear the traffic at all. Yep. It was crazy. We were there for Carnival, which they don't call Carnival, but anyway. Yep, carry on.
No, absolutely. I think it's a great thing, and it also helps with more eyes on the street, makes the city safer at different times of the night.
Just as more lived in, right?
Yeah, exactly.
There's just more people around. It's just a more lived in feel. Now we're going to wrap it up there on that beautiful, potential optimistic note there. And we're going to say thank you very much for coming along, Glenn.
My pleasure.
It has been a pleasure talking to you and hearing all about George Street and your work there and the redevelopment. And honestly, we could go on forever. I'm just going
You
to
probably
sign off
will.
and say, ka kite, you've been listening to the OI podcast. If you particularly like this episode with Glenn, you might also like our previous episode with the Dunedin Sound with Stephen Steadman, possibly also the Otago Regional Council with Gretchen Robertson, and there was a little bit of urban stuff about bees. We didn't quite get into the greening of cities today, but we had a little bit of talk about that with the Jenny Yant interview on buzzing bees buzzing, the buzzers bees. Can't remember what we called it now. Thank you very much. You've been listening to the OI podcast, the shout out for the arts, sciences and Mataranga Māori.
You can support this podcast by becoming a member of the OI. Check out the Otago Institute for Arts and Sciences on Facebook or our website.
If you'd like to listen again to this episode or others from the series, look for the OI podcast on ORFM's website, oar.org.nz.
Brought to you by the Otago Institute for Arts and Sciences, the Otago branch of the Royal Society of New Zealand.
This podcast was produced by ORFM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.